Starting our list off at number 10, the turkey fakeout. Okay, this one is pretty hilarious. I have to start off our list here, especially in a dark list about crossbreeding. Come on. Back in the 60s, turkey biologists in Pennsylvania thought, you know what if a male turkey was in a room with a fake turkey? Yeah, a fake female turkey. Would he try and flirt with it? Would he, I am legend, this fake turkey? What would happen? Well, the answer is yes. These male turkeys would try and mate with a fake turkey, which is funny, but by the end of the test, they were really surprised more than anything. They would just have the head of a turkey on a stick, and these dudes still came out like, hey, what's going on? You single? What's up? What's happening? It didn't matter. It was just the head, and the rest didn't matter. The sticks chicks over here are catching every turkey's attention, but why? Why don't they care about the body? What's going on? Like, biologically, this makes no sense. The scientific conclusion here, yes, there was one, was that the turkey fixates on the head when it comes to finding a mating partner, which is honestly pretty sweet. They're holding eye contact the whole time, even with their bobby weird heads. They're still like, hey, it's just you and me, let's talk. Number 9, the gastric brooding frog. Okay, now we're back. Now, immediately back to business. Crossbreeding and gastric brooding. Okay, we're getting scientific now. I'm a big fan of frogs, except for when they hatch eggs out of their back. We don't like those. Our editors also don't like those clips either. I found out the hard way. I'm like, yeah, insert clip of a frog coming out of other frog's back from 129. They're like, please God, no. So, bless your soul. Give the thumbs up for our editors today. Thumbs up for all of our editors today. We give them horrible, horrible links they have to put together and make into art. These frogs, not so bad. These frogs would swallow their eggs and they would hatch them out of their mouth. Honestly, they're fascinating creatures. And with the recent Lazarus project, scientists are trying to bring the Australian gastric brooding frog back from extinction. So we can see all that again in person. We can see them. Honestly, I think the back stuff's better now that I think about it. A frog coming out of a mouth, ooh. It went extinct back in 1983, but scientists have now figured out how to implant dead cells into a fresh egg from an entirely different frog species. Yeah, just zombie frogs, I guess. Zombie frogs that give birth through their mouths. Do we know what we're doing here? Sounds weird when you say it out loud. Amphibians are declining worldwide, so if we can get these guys out of extinction, we're looking good. We're looking better, rather. Number 8, Martha. Look, I like to keep it light, so I have to include my girl Martha on this list. The passenger pigeon, she once flocked over the skies of Canada. This was back in the 19th century. Billions of these bright orange pigeons would paint the skies, and rumor has it, they would fly in flocks so large that it would block out the sun for a short amount of time. Beautiful, could you imagine? Flocks that block. We love it. But only a few decades passed and passenger pigeons are now no more. They're entirely extinct. Sad stuff. The very last passenger pigeon, her name was Martha. She passed away in the Cincinnati Zoo back in 1914. So we took a look at her DNA to see if Martha held any secrets to their extinction, and we found a key. Possibly we could bring Martha back. I don't know why I did that, it's pretty dark. Like a little bird. Wouldn't work at all. They discovered Martha had a low genetic diversity for such a growing population. Natural selection and hunting eliminated arguably the nicest looking pigeon. The last one died in 1914, but in 2019, paleontologists found remains of the pigeon in protected indigenous lands in the Northwest Territories. So now we have hope, right there. They blended passenger pigeon DNA with Archaeopteryx dinosaur DNA. Yeah, we're bringing back pigeons with a touch of dinosaur. I'll say it again, on one hand, yeah, that's great. I'm glad science is allowing us to try again, but look at the pigeons we have now. What's gonna happen to these guys? They're hardcore. Pigeons now will walk onto the subway. They'll ask you what time it is. They don't care. These graceful birds from the 1910s, I don't think they're ready. That's like a Back to the Future, that's like Hot Tub Time Machine type. I'm like, you guys won't get along. Number 7, woolly rhinoceros. Since I mentioned the revival of woolly mammoths in part 1, what better time to mention this hairy beast? The woolly rhino. Okay, I oddly want to pet him, weirdly. Once upon a time, these rhinos were common throughout Europe and Asia. They were all prepared for the cold tundra, hence the fur, the thick blanket of fur. Just like the woolly mammoth, right? They adapt to survive. So no ice age will stop this rhino. Ideally, that was the plan. I mean, it didn't help them out entirely, but it was mostly humans needing food and warmth that led to their extinction. So cut to 14,000 years later, we're trying to apologize. We're trying to make it up to them by bringing them back to life. It's a little hotter now, good luck. The same company responsible for the Mammoth Project is also trying to bring back this hairy boy. I mean, yeah, again, I'm all for science, but if these species died out that long ago, will highways help them? Imagine running into one of these. Number 6, Megatherium. We talked about bringing back woolly rhinos and woolly mammoths, so what other Ice Age cast members can we potentially see on the highway? Perhaps the Megatherium, aka the giant sloth? Why are we doing this? What if this works? We don't want to see this. Sloths used to be a lot bigger than we think, folks. We often laugh at them for being slow and stuff. The movie Ice Age sure didn't help their case, but we learned stuff like the dodo bird. We're bringing them back. Sloths, we're also bringing them back. Of course, the giant ground sloth is closely related to our modern three-toed sloth, but luckily for us, today's sloths aren't the size of an elephant. That would be a horror film if we brought these back. Like, let's just leave normal sloths. We may be able to bring this one back, although they died off thousands of years ago due to DNA samples. Yeah, we got some DNA samples extracted from their hair remains, so the next step now that's waiting for us is to develop a fetus in an artificial womb. That's the hard part, but we're very close. Too close, I'd say. Stop. If you're working on any, Megatherium science projects, just, chill. Just chill out for a bit. Number 5, spider art. For a nice halfway point here, I have to mention NASA's 1995 spider test, which sounds really scary, but it's not that bad, hear me out. When nature meets science, we often get jarring results, be it hybrid animals, clones, you name it. Spiders, as fascinating as they already are, can be even more mysterious, especially when they're exposed to mind-altering illicit substances. Yeah, just some hardcore stuff. NASA wanted to determine the toxicity between said substances and what differences they may look like. Spiders are fascinating. We can literally see how they think and survive. We see it up close when we walk through them and go, ew, gross, but we never see them like this, right? Caffeinated behavior is all over the place. It doesn't look like a normal spider at all, but with hallucinogens, it's the same shape, but it's almost missing steps, right? Little differences between all these tests. I don't think any animal should have coffee, period. I don't think an espresso goes well with any bug. Yeah, trust me. I'm all jacked up on coffee right now. The moa. This New Zealand bird went extinct about 600 years ago, and I'm pretty glad. They're absolutely terrifying. They were flightless birds, massive, hence the flightlessness, and archaeologists first discovered a fossil in a cave. Its flesh and everything was still attached. It looked something out of a horror movie. It was terrible. These ancient birds would reach around 5 or 6 feet tall, and when you think of dinosaurs, you probably think, oh, that's quite petite. No, this is horrible. The birds stopped flying right after these dinosaurs went extinct. According to biologist Matthew Phillips from the Australian National University in Canberra, these birds safely roamed the land after they didn't need to make, daring dino escapes. So they got fat, they walked around, they stopped flying, and they just retired. Then they would hang out in caves and just eat good. Phillips says this is an advantage when it came to birds in evolution because wings, big or small, kill energy. So it might seem a little depressing to watch a creature, lose the ability to fly, but it's because they're eating better, right? I would rather eat really well than fly, to be honest. I can't even fly now, and I'm like, I'd still rather just eat a lot. Again, why are we mixing DNA of a dinosaur with new birds? This is where we turn into Jurassic Park. Any minute. Next year I'll be like, hey, top 10 animals that made the test and now we're screwed. Number 3, the Steller sea cow. Stellar indeed. Yeah, the Steller sea cow was named after George Wilhelm Steller, who discovered this massive creature back in the mid-1700s during the Vitus Bering's Great Northern Expedition. They found her right after the crew became shipwrecked. What a lovely little surprise to an otherwise horrible situation. They were all over the place 2 million years ago. They were no match for humans at all. They only swam around a meter deep, and once humans came into the picture much later, they were very easy to hunt. They were fat little blubber balls that would sit in shallow water. I mean, come on. George Steller commented that the animals had an uncommon love for their families, which made it even easier to hunt. Considering the 1-year gestation period, the species couldn't reproduce fast enough to keep up with our hunting. But with this list, we have a little hope, right? That's why I'm here. Hi, now you're sad. I'm here to make your day a little happier. Scientists were able to sequence the genome, which means that we may see these creatures very soon, one day. Hopefully soon. The answer may lie in the DNA of a dugong. Yeah, dugongs are the cow of the sea, so what better relative to kind of pick apart and maybe crossbreed. Number 2, the mouse with an ear on its back. And we're right back to horrible stuff. Okay, if we ever reboot Stuart Little, this guy needs to audition. He's killing it. The mouse with a human ear, folks. This is like the world's greatest mouse spy. This is horrible. What are we looking at here? Why did someone do this? Well, back in 1997, this mouse became the test subject to determine if scientists could grow cartilage using chondrocytes, aka cells from a cow. Well, it worked, and we're still talking about it, obviously, because it's the weirdest thing I've ever looked at. Yeah, Joseph began designing human organs, and this was during a shortage where human organs wasn't just like, common, easy thing to get. He wasn't just bored and, started making ears. He was changing the medical game, okay? And little did he know he was about to change the science game as well. He constructed an ear, a fake ear, then told his brother Chuck and his partner Bob not to bring up the fact that he attached said ear to a mouse. But Chuck, obviously, because of what happened, he spilled the beans, he told a few friends. But now we all know how cow cartilage can create cells, so little secret became great science. I really want to Q-tip his back. Is that weird? I want to Q-tip the mouse with an ear on its back's back. And finally, number 1, the multi-dog. Okay, crossbreeding experiments from hell. Let's finish on a really messed up one. The multi-dog. This was back in the 50s when a Soviet scientist, Vladimir Demikov, created a multi-headed dog. Time magazine covered it, of course. This is a feat in science. As cruel as it is, of course, this was a big deal. The adult dog had a newborn pup grafted to its neck, so when it grew, it could survive off the blood of the main, bigger dog. The body, for lack of a better term. When observed, the puppy did have its own characteristics. It was playful, it was growling, it would lick people's hand and stuff like that, just as the other dog's characteristics would be, in its own unique way. It's a sad 1950s Soviet animal experiment, so of course the animal didn't survive a long time, but crossbreeding experiments from hell, that's why we're here. This is the note that we're going to end on.
Starting off this countdown, we have the baboon human. In October of 1984, Stephanie Faye Beauclair, otherwise known as Baby Faye, was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, meaning the left side of her heart did not grow properly. Sadly, no human heart donor could be found, so they decided to give her the heart of a baboon. In fact, she was the first infant who got a heart from an animal, and at this time, no infant had successfully received a heart transplant, even with a human heart. But it worked for Baby Faye. Sadly, she lived for less than a month before passing away. In our 9th spot today, we have the human mouse. Mice are constantly being experimented on in labs. This time, scientists in Japan tried to create a human mouse. Basically, they injected a mouse with human stem cells. They did this in an attempt to grow a human pancreas in the animal, but due to backlash, they have certain rules in place. At any point during the experiment, if the mouse is said to start developing a human-type brain, then it has to be killed and the experiments have to stop. Thank gosh though, because I'm not trying to have the world ruled by weird mutant human mice. No thank you. In our 8th spot today, we have the mice with human brain. So I know I just finished saying how the mice were killed if any human DNA was found in the brain, but in 2005, a professor at Stanford University was given permission to create a mouse-human hybrid. He did so by transplanting human brain stem cells into the brains of mice. Now, the main goal of his experiment was to be able to study neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. Now, the first couple of rounds did not go so well. They found less than 1% of human cells in the rodent's brain. But by 2010, they found success. That's when they managed to, and I quote, use mouse stem cells to develop sensory hair cells which could combat human hearing loss. They also managed to make the mice more human, as in the mice with the human brain cells were far more intelligent than the other mice. In our 7th spot, we have the human Z. Over the years, a number of scientists have run some wild tests on chimpanzees. Now, what makes these mammals of interest to them is because of how similar they are to humans. Humans and chimps share 98.8% of their DNA, hence why scientists are trying to make a chimp-human hybrid. Ilya Ivanov was the first person to attempt to create a human-chimp hybrid. Ilya continued these experiments until the 1920s. During that time, the Soviet Union was also running the same experiments. In 2019, rumor has it that a team of researchers from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in the US successfully produced the first human-monkey chimeras. So yeah, I don't really know how I feel about that. I don't know. In our 6th spots, we have the conga. In the early 2000s, when scientists unearthed the conga skeletons in northern Syria, they had no idea what they were looking at. The skeletons looked like they belonged to horses, but they dated back to 2600 BC, and domestic horses wouldn't appear in the region for another 500 years, so they were a bit confused. Then they realized that this wasn't a horse, it was a human-bred animal. In fact, this animal was a cross between a donkey and a wild ass. Apparently, back then they were highly valuable and very expensive. Now, it's believed that these kungas were created for warfare, because not only could they pull wagons, but it was believed that they would be tougher. The thing with donkeys is that they would get scared easily and they didn't need their donkeys running off mid-battle. But the wild asses, no one could tame them. So then they would breed them together and bam! Created an animal more desirable for them. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the human-pig hybrid. The whole crossing humans with animal thing definitely creeps me out, but this one isn't what you think. They aren't creating a creature that is half human and half pig. Thank gosh, at least not yet. Instead, they are using the pigs to grow human organs inside of them instead of having patients wait for a donor. The first experiment was run in 2017, and an embryo was placed in an adult pig for 4 weeks. Then it was taken out to analyze, and the embryo survived and contained some human cells. Now they are going to figure out if pig embryos can handle enough human cells to create full human organs. However, a lot of people are against these experiments, saying that it is highly unethical. In our 4th spot, we have the dogs. A number of the dog breeds that you love have been severely crossbred, and when dog breeders get overcome by greed, they start to care more about money than they do about their dog's health. Take a look at this dog right here. This is a dog that suffers from short spine syndrome. You can see it has a squished body, huge jaw, and a really bad underbite. The dog was born from backyard breeding. The breeder was carelessly breeding a bunch of his dogs together. And this is the result, which is heartbreaking to see. And most of the time, these dogs are put down as no one wants to adopt them. Coming in at number 3, we have the virus chimera. In 2017, Portuguese researchers decided to mess around with a mouse virus to create a chimera virus. Basically, a mouse virus with a human viral gene. Now, you're probably concerned like me, because I read this and I'm like, oh, they're trying to create another outbreak or something. But no, apparently this allows them to study viruses and how it impacts the rodent's body. But I will say that accidental outbreaks have occurred. In our 2nd spot, we have the rabbit-human mix. In 2003, a team of scientists in Shanghai managed to fuse human cells with rabbit eggs. In the United States, scientists have been trying to do the same thing, but their attempts were always unsuccessful. Move over, American scientists, the one in Shanghai beat you to it. Now, this experiment was done to see if it can be used to grow cells or tissues for transplant patients. However, this experiment also had strict rules, and once the rabbit had human cells in its brain, it had to be destroyed. So they only let the human rabbit develop for a couple of days before they killed it and harvested it for stem cells. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the human demon sheep. Now, this is gonna keep you up at night for sure. In 2017, villagers in South Africa were horrified when a sheep gave birth to something that didn't look like a lamb, okay? In fact, it looked eerily human-like. As a result, people in the village were freaking out, saying that whatever was born was done by the works of the devil. In fact, rumor has it that this lamb was created from someone injecting the sheep with human sperm. Now, the lamb was stillborn, so it wasn't born alive. But still, how creepy is that? And many people in the village were convinced that beasts and/or witchcraft were behind this creature.
Number 10, a wolfen. A wolfen is part whale, part dolphin. The existence of wolfens have been a legend for centuries. Known in fisherman lore as the Great Grey Beast, they come from the mating of a female bottlenose dolphin with a male false killer whale. Now, a false killer whale, by the way, is not actually a whale. Both these animals come from the oceanic dolphin family with the toothed whale suborder. Wolfens are one of the rarest hybrid animals. Citizen wolfen sightings in the wild are common, common, but concrete evidence still eludes scientists. Currently, we can only reliably see these animal hybrids in captivity. Wolfins are an extremely interesting balance of their parents as well. Their skin is a dark gray, the perfect blend of light gray dolphin skin and black false killer whale skin. They also have 66 teeth, which is the precise average of a dolphin's 88 teeth and the false killer whale's 44 teeth. To me, these look weird and they kind of make me uncomfortable. Number 9. Wolf dog. A wolf dog, also called a wolf dog hybrid or wolf hybrid, is a candid hybrid resulting from the mating of a wolf and a dog. The term wolf dog is preferred by most of the animal's proponents and breeders because the domestic dog recently was taxonomically recategorized as a subspecies of wolf. The American Veterinary Medical Association and the United States Department of Agriculture refers to the animals as wolf dog hybrids. Rescue organizations consider any dog with wolf heritage within the last 5 generations to be a wolf dog, including some established wolf dog breeds. In 1998, USDA estimated an approximate population of 300,000 wolf dogs in the United States, the highest of any country worldwide, with some other sources giving a population possibly as high as 500,000. In the first generation of hybrids, gray wolves are most often crossed with wolf-like dogs such as German Shepherds, Siberian Huskies, and Alaskan Mammutes for an appearance most appealing to owners desiring to own an exotic pet. Because wolf dogs are generic mixtures between wolves and dogs, their physical and behavior characteristics cannot be predicted with any certainty. Number 8. Zebroid. A hybrid between a zebra and any other member of the equine family is one of the most common in the animal kingdom. In most cases, the sire is a zebra stallion, the mother could be anyone. Known collectively as zebroid, the name of the breed depends on who the mother is. A fowl could be a zorse, zebrel, zonkey, zebunky, or a zoni. Zebra hybrids usually have the appearance of whichever animal they have been crossbred with, while still retaining the striped coat of a pure zebra. Now, most of these animals don't have fully striped coats. Instead, the stripes are usually found on just the legs or non-white areas of the body, depending on the genetics of the non-zebra parent. When it comes to zonkies, donkeys are closely related to zebras, and both animals belong to the horse family. These zebra-donkey hybrids are very rare. In South Africa, they occur where zebras and donkeys are found in proximity to each other. Today, various zebroids are bred as riding and draft animals and as curiosities in circuses and smaller zoos. Number 7. Growler bear. Known variously as a Pizzly bear, a growler bear is a grizzly and polar bear hybrid that is a rare hybrid within the Ursidae family. Tales of such creatures were told within the First Nation communities of North America down the centuries. But it wasn't until DNA samples were taken from a strange-looking bear found near Sash Harbor in the Canadian Arctic in 2006 that their existence was finally confirmed. Growler bears are interesting because, generally speaking, polar bears and grizzlies have a mutual contempt for one another and will rarely coexist in captivity or in their natural habitats. However, extreme situations and human interventions have produced more of these adorably shaggy caramel-colored hybrid bears. They typically grow to be slightly smaller than polar bears, averaging 60 inches tall at the shoulder and around 1,000 pounds, but they're better to be able to survive in warm climates thanks to their grizzly bear genes. Number 6. Jag lion. A jag lion, sometimes referred to as a jaguan, is one of the many portmanteaus used to define hybrid species of animals. In this case, it is a blend of 2 cats, a lion, and a jaguar. Both belong to the genus Panthera. Their genetics aren't too far off. It's not surprising that they're able to mate, but they are extremely rare. A jag lion is the offspring of a female lion, lioness, and a male jaguar. To date, there haven't been any matings of a male lion and a female jaguar, so that hybrid doesn't have its own special name. Now, spots are definitely a dominant gene, and any speckled big cat is sure to pass them on to their offspring. And like its mother, the jag lion cub has a distinct tuft of hair at the end of its tail. It wasn't until the 21st century that this crossbreed became known to the world. Before this century, there hadn't been any record of such a cross being made, despite experiments in crossbreeding lions, leopards, and tigers. They are rare. And how rare is extremely rare? Well, right now there are only 2 jag lions in the world. They live in Canada and they were bred unintentionally and are in captivity. There has been no written record of any other crossbreeding between lions and jaguars. Number 5. 5. The Iron Age pig. The Iron Age pig is a hybrid between a wild boar and a domestic Tamworth pig meant to recreate the type of pig represented by prehistoric works of the Iron Age in ancient Europe. A project to create them, under the name Iron Age pig, started in the early 1980s. In many areas, a variable of mixtures of these hybrids and feral pigs of all domesticated original stock have become invasive species. Their status as pest animals has reached crisis proportions in Australia, parts of Brazil, and parts of the United States, and the animals are often freely hunted in hopes of eradicating them or at least reducing them to a controllable population. When bred intentionally, the hybrids are intended to visually recreate the back-breed look of pigs represented in the prehistoric artworks of the Iron Age and in early ancient Egypt. Now, generally, they are only raised in Europe for a specialty meat market, and in keeping with their heritage, are generally more aggressive and harder to handle than pure domestic pigs. Number 4. Beefalo. Beefalo constitute a hybrid offspring of domestic cattle, usually a male in managed breeding programs, and the American bison, usually a female in managed breeding programs. Accidental crosses were noticed as long ago as 1749 in the southern states of North America during British colonization. Cattle and bison were first intentionally crossbred during the mid-19th century. In 1983, the 3 main beefalo registration groups reorganized under the American Beefalo World Registry. Until November 2008, there were 2 beefalo associations, the American Beefalo World Registry and American Beefalo International. These organizations joined to form American Beefalo Association Incorporated, which currently operates as the registering body for beefalo in the United States. Now, the breed was created to combine the characteristics of both animals for beef production. A recent USDA study showed beefalo meat, like bison meat, actually tended to be lower in fat and cholesterol. They are also thought to produce less damage to the rangeland than cattle. Personally, I just think saying beefalo is fun. You should try it. Number 3. Green sea slug. Possibly the most unusual hybrid animal on this list is the green sea slug. It's a sea slug that incorporates genetic material from the algae it eats into its own DNA. So it's part sea slug, part algae. The strange result is a plant-animal hybrid that can consume food like an animal or create its own nutrients via photosynthesis. Scientists call these sea slugs emerald green alcia. Their ability to turn solar energy into food is what gives them their brilliant green hue. Scientists acknowledge that they'll have to do more research in order to determine how this phenomenon happens, but as of now, this is their only successful instance of gene transfer from one type of complex organism to another. This creature can be found along the east coast of the United States, including the states of Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Rhode Island, Florida, and Texas. They can also be found as far north as Nova Scotia, Canada, and are most commonly found in salt marshes, tidal marshes, pools, and shallow creeks. Number 2. Hybrid crocodile. The only known hybrid crocodile in the world is named Yai. Yai's parents are a saltwater crocodile and a Siamese crocodile. The crossbreeding happened only because its parents were kept together in a zoo. It wouldn't have occurred in the wild as these 2 types of crocodiles have different habitats. Yai is huge. And in the year 2000, Guinness World Records said he was the world's largest crocodile held in captivity at 19 feet and 8 inches, which is as tall as a giraffe. He also weighed 2,645 pounds, which is almost the amount of 2 cows. Since then, Yai has grown even more and is now 21 feet long. He's located at the Samtapakran Crocodile Farm and Zoo in Thailand. I hope I said that right. All I gotta say is I'm glad he's in captivity. I can't imagine how I would react if I saw him out in the wild. And coming in at number 1, the super cow. The super cow, also known as a Belgian blue cow, is a breed of beef cattle from Belgium. The Belgium's blue's extremely lean, hyper-sculpted, ultra-muscular physique is termed double muscling. The double muscling phenotype is a heritable condition resulting in an increased number of muscle fibers instead of the normal enlargement of individual muscle fibers. This particular trait is shared with another breed of cattle known as Piedmontese. Both of these breeds have an increased ability to convert feed into lean muscle, which causes these particular breeds' meat to have a reduced fat content and reduced tenderness. The Belgian Blue is named after its typically blue-gray mottled hair, however, it's actually actual color can vary from white to black. The Belgian blue has been exported to many parts of the world. It is reported by DATIS by 24 countries in Africa, the Americas, Europe, and Oceania. Of these, 10 report population data. In 2022, the world population was estimated to be around 107,875. Now, double-muscled cows routinely experience dystocia difficulty in parturition, even when bred to normal beef bulls or dairy bulls, because of a narrower birth canal. The birth weight and width of the calf also may be higher than in animals without the double muscling gene. People also think it's unfair to breed these animals because of their difficulty walking due to the muscles and how big they are. These cows are absolutely jacked, and I would not want to run into one of them or get in a fight with it.
Kicking off the list at number 10, a lamel. Or a comma, you pick, that's the best part of these hybrid animals. They have two names, really, so you can choose whatever sounds the most silly. A lamel is the result of crossbreeding in Dubai. Yeah, the crown prince thought, you know what, we've made enough memories here, let's make an animal. Why not, what could go wrong? Let's make a comma and name it Rama. And he did just that. Rama the comma, just rolls off the tongue, what could go wrong? Researchers in the United Arab Emirates artificially inseminated a camel back in 1998. They were hoping to have this brand new animal born with the wool of a llama and the temperament of a camel. Instead, they got him, this little guy. Rama is known to be moody, but you know what, to be fair, I would be moody as well if I was just born. If I was just created out of nowhere. Like, why do my knees hurt? They're like, well, those are new knees. We have never seen those knees before. So, that's why they're clicking. Number 9, mules and hinnies. So right off the bat here, a mule is already a hybrid. It's the offspring of a male donkey and a female horse. And a hinny is the offspring of a male horse and a female donkey. Get it? Got it? Great. Mules have been a pretty common asset since George Washington days, fun fact. But it wasn't until 2003 until the University of Idaho cloned one. Yeah, we cloned a hybrid animal. I feel like we're flying too close to the sun here, honestly. The mule's name, well, the clone rather, was Idaho Gem. That's a fair name. He's pretty well Gem, yeah. Number 8, sheep goats. I love these ones. I'm not gonna lie, they're odd, but they're very cute, undeniably cute. These little miracles. It was really this one goat in northern Germany who did this one. He saw this sheep on the other side of a fence and thought, you know what? Forget the last million years of evolution. I'm gonna try something. I'm gonna go talk to her. Let's see what happens. She goes to another school. Let's see what's up. I'm gonna be brave. He hopped the fence, went over, got some phone numbers, had some dates, did some dirties. The odd time this does happen, usually nothing happens long term. But when farmer Klaus Eksternbrink saw this fling, he couldn't believe his eyes later. A sheep goat, or a geep, was born in front of his eyes, yeah, and they named it Lisa. What a lovely name. How sweet is that? Also, this list starts a little tame and then they get into some, pig human stuff. So if you're saying, aw, right now, no, buckle up, it gets much worse. Starting with number 7, beefalo. Yeah, not necessarily the government, but back in the mid-1700s, thousands of ranchers, I'm talking like 6,000 ranchers, all agreed to raise hybrid beefalo. Yeah, that was the thing they were gonna change in history at that point. They're like, let's do it, and they went with beefalo. Well, they didn't really have a choice. The beefalo is a result of American bison meeting cattle. These accidental hybrids are normal. They're expected in some way, shape, or form, but cut to the late 1800s, cattle and bison were intentionally created. Yeah, Colonel Samuel Bedson, guy was warden of Stony Mountain Penitentiary. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna crossbreed some animals. Yeah, take my thousands of keys. Thank you. I'm gonna go. Animal life it is for me now, I guess. Guy buys 8 bisons and then breeds them with Durham cattle. Yeah, what do you do on your weekends when you retire, I guess? The beefalo is a great improvement. Apparently it's a great milker. I don't know much about milking beefalos or buffaloes, but Warden Samuel Bedson, he was your guy in the late 1800s. He would have chatted your ear off about milk and beefalo. Number 6, lions. Back in the 1980s, the Chatbar Zoo in India started an experimental program where they would breed together a domestic lion, which is a bit smaller and has less of a shaggy mane, with an African lion, in the hopes that they could be introduced to the wild and help with the dwindling population of wild lions in India. On paper, this sounds like a good idea, a step forward, rather, dare I say. The zoo found 2 African lions that were being used in a circus and then brought them in to breed with their 2 Asiatic lions. Yeah, it's like, hey, we saved ya. Just kidding, you're going to a much worse place. When the cubs were born, it was clear this was a mistake. Things weren't going well at all. His back legs were quite weak. They were having extreme trouble walking, and as they got older, obviously this got worse. Their immune systems started to fail more and more, and come 2000, they had bred more than 70 of these hybrid lions. They finally decided to stop the program, and then all these males were given vasectomies in order to, prevent any reproduction down the line. But there were laws that prohibit them from killing these animals, so they were actually just waiting for them to die naturally, which is sad. You're like, hey, great law, but yeah, today, come on. When there's a dwindling population of lions, it's wild that they wasted 20 years trying to do this when, they could have simply just bred lions that they had and then focused all their energy on that instead of creating a alien lion. But who am I? I'm just a YouTube host. It's probably harder than it sounds, but man, this stuff is, it's pretty rough. Number 5, wallfin. Well, there's a word I have never said before in my entire life. These guys were created when a female common bottlenose dolphin was bred with a male killer whale. Yeah, what a riot, what a pair, what a duo. These are extremely rare and they've been found in the wild, but unfortunately, most of the ones that have existed were bred in captivity. Yeah, because humans suck. The first recorded wallfin was born at the Tokyo SeaWorld in 1981, but he sadly died not even a year after his birth, just 2 days in and it was done. Obviously this is not working out, but the firstborn wallfin in the United States that miraculously somehow survived was at Sea Life Park in Hawaii, and that was in 1985. And her name was Kekamalu. She ended up having 3 babies. She did survive. Now the first baby passed away after a few days, and the second passed away at the age of 9, but 9 years old. This is already a massive improvement from what we've seen earlier, and thankfully the third one is still living to this day. Yeah, both Kekamalu and her daughter are still alive, but they still remain in captivity. Number 4, farm cattle. In the 1990s, farmers in India figured that if they were to crossbreed their cattle, they'd be able to breed cattle that could produce more milk, which would of course mean more money, which is better for everyone and their families. Now this was an ideal step, right? What could possibly go wrong? A lot of things could go wrong here. Different breeds of bulls were brought in and farmers were expecting milky results, good results. And they ended up with cattle that did produce more milk, but at the same time, these guys needed way more food or else they'd stop producing said great amounts of milk. They wouldn't get milky results after that point. Plus they were less resistant to local diseases, so they required way more vet visits. So yeah, they're producing more milk, which will get us more money, but they also cost us more money long term. So AKA, not a solution. Number 3, dog mixing. Oh, this one's sad too. No more fun and games, no more milk and jokes, this one's wild. But this one is also a reminder that you can't just put any type of dog together and then just see what happens. Yeah, that's not gonna fly, my friends. That's not how DNA works. I got the D, didn't know how to do the N or the A, really. Back in 2010, a woman named Julie Leroy was working as an animal control officer when an owner of a pit bull puppy came in and said she just didn't want the dog anymore, wasn't feeling comfortable owning this specific dog. In fact, it didn't look like any dog she had seen in the past, which was odd considering her occupation. The dog had a shorter body, it was like stuffy almost, and its jaw was larger and had a massive underbite. It didn't look easy to navigate at all, this poor thing. Well, it turns out the dog suffered from short spine syndrome. This is the result of backyard breeding, just improvising on your own. Don't do that. Yeah, leave it to the people who know what they're doing, please, for the love of God. Julie ended up taking care of this dog because she had to, because this person's like, bye. And they had a great relationship, but this is not ideal. Don't do this. Number 2, human pig. Yeah, of course we had to save this one for the last 2. This is wild. This is some next level stuff. This is a Marvel film? Human pig? What are we doing? Scientists in California back in 2017 were up to some pretty remarkable stuff. An embryo was placed in an adult pig for around 4 weeks, then once scientists analyzed said embryo afterwards, they learned that the embryos not only 1, survived the process, which is a miracle in itself, but 2, the human cells also remained. Okay, now what? This is next level crossbreeding right here. The goal here, scientifically, was to grow human organs inside the pigs. And Juan Carlos Esbizua Belmonte successfully created pig-human hybrids at the Salk Institute lab. Yeah, can't wait till we have a pig superhero now, or pig villain. Those exist too. Number 1, Pizzly Bear. Yeah, we gotta finish this list off on an educational note. We always gotta remind the world that the ice everywhere is melting all the time. Yep, we're slowly melting, folks. Better believe it. And Pizzly Bears are here to warn us. Back in 2006, a Canadian hunter found a hybrid bear. They called it a Pizzly Bear or a Growler Bear because it looked like a mix of the two. But it actually was. It was a hybrid. Tests were later done in 2010 after more appeared in Alaska and northern Canada. Now historically, polar bears branched off of grizzlies DNA-wise, but now we're at a point where they're coming back together. Why? Because everything's melting and food is becoming sparse. So now they're going further away to find food, and in turn, they're meeting each other, and then they're doing the thing. Now they're starting to merge back together. And in turn, we get these terrifying bears. We have some human hybrids, some pig stuff, some milk talk. This list was loaded. This is a loaded pierogi full of crossbreeding facts. There you go. Just what you wanted to hear, I bet.
Starting off this countdown, we have the wallfin. Take a guess at what 2 animals were bred for this one. If you guessed a whale and a dolphin, you're correct. A wallfin is a mix between an Atlantic bottlenose dolphin and a false killer whale. The first recorded wolfen was born in 1981 in Tokyo SeaWorld, but sadly he only lived to around 6 months. Probably a prime example of why they shouldn't exist in the first place. Another wolfen was later born at a sea life park in Hawaii in 1985, but she had trouble reproducing and all her babies sadly passed away. In our 9th spot today, we have the horse human. And this one is going to ruin your day completely. In 2001, a man was caught trying to inject human sperm into a horse. He had done this to about 6 horses until he was caught by police and arrested. Thankfully, none of the horses got pregnant. But ew, imagine if they did? Woo. In our 8th spot, we have the Iron Age pig. Now take a look at this porker, he is a chunky guy. The Iron Age pig is a cross between a domestic pig and a wild boar. Now something about that cross just does not sit right with me. Now people like breeding these pigs because they can get a lot of meat out of them or just sell them for a lot. But they are considered very hostile animals. This is due to the fact that wild boars are typically more aggressive, and that's a dominant trait that gets passed along to their offspring. Moving on to number 7, we have the infertile pink bollworm. The pink bollworms are invasive pests that lay eggs on cotton balls, and then once they hatch, the larvae eat the seeds and damage the cotton fibers. In 2005, the situation became so bad that scientists were like, okay, we gotta figure out a solution here. So they decided to create sterile pink bollworms. They did this by treating a bunch of moths with radiation. The radiation would damage their reproductive cells, but it wouldn't kill them. That way, when they encountered a normal pink bollworm and the two mated, bam, it would create an infertile pink bollworm. So for 4 years, 2 billion pink bollworm moths that were treated with radiation were released into Arizona's cotton fields. They literally would fly an airplane above the fields and just drop millions of these moths down onto the crops. And it worked. It helped with the bollworm problem. But imagine if their plan didn't work. That could have gone really bad and damaged entire cotton fields. Coming in at number 6, we have the sheep with human livers. In 2007, scientists at the University of Nevada, Reno managed to grow human livers inside of a sheep. They did this by injecting human stem cells from bone marrow into sheep fetuses. Now they chose sheep as their test subjects because their circulatory system is very similar to ours. In the end, they managed to create livers made with 20% human cells. They are hopeful that one day this can be used to help grow human organs for those in need of a transplant inside these animals. But anything done with animals is highly controversial, especially when it has to do with injecting them with human DNA and stuff. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the cows. I swear, no animal is safe out there, okay? Not even cows. In 2008, British researchers were given the okay to conduct some human-animal experiments. As part of the experiment, they decided to manipulate cow eggs. So they took the nucleus of the cow egg, which has the source of the most DNA, and they replaced it with the nucleus of a human cell to create a growing embryo. They then watched the egg develop and multiply. Scientists could then extract the stem cells from this. They hope that one day they can use the stem cells in disease treatments. Moving on to number 4, we have the Jeep. And I'm not talking about the car Jeep, we're talking G-E-E-P, okay? A mixture between a goat and a sheep. Now these animals are adorably cute, but sadly breeding the two can be a very risky game. Very few babies are actually carried to term, and even few manage to survive birth. Those that do often have a bunch of genetic abnormalities, but people still cross them together, which is just sad because you're breeding animals destined for failure, and for what reason? Moving on to number 3, we have the Jaglion. Can you guys guess what this animal is a mix between? It's kind of obvious. It's a mix between a jaguar and a lion. But these animals are actually naturally born, which is wild. Like, I just can't imagine a jaguar and a lion getting it on. So it first started when a lion and a jaguar coexisted in the same zoo together. They were raised together and, well, one thing led to another, bada bing bada boom, mama lion became preggo. I shared this love story in another video, but it's so cute but also sad, but I just want to share it again. So there once was a jaguar named Diablo and a lion named Lola. The two were raised side by side and they were inseparable. When Lola got mature though, they kept Diablo away from her so that they wouldn't mate. But whenever they were apart, both animals got depressed. It got so bad to the point where Lola wouldn't even eat. So they brought them back together and they were happy and eating and thriving again. You can't keep true love apart. And obviously one thing did lead to another, and they did end up mating, and they had 2 Jaglian babies together. And they all lived happily ever after. Coming in at number 2, we have the goat human. I can't with this one. Okay, I just can't. But this image right here is said to be a picture of a human goat baby. Story goes that in 2016 in Alabama, of all places, a goat gave birth to an odd-looking baby. In fact, its kid looked very human-like. So it's said that this goat was actually the product of a human getting it on with the goat. I know, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. I threw up in my mouth a little when I read that. But again, this is just a rumor. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the hybrid lions. Now, this is actually a very sad example of crossbreeding gone wrong. In 2006, nearly 24 crossbred lions in northern India were dying after they developed a mysterious disease. The disease was a result of inbreeding and a weakened gene pool. Basically, they didn't know this, but they kept breeding lions that all had this weakened gene, and nearly 80 lions were affected by this. The lions being born had weak hind legs and had difficulty walking, and they couldn't run at all. They also had failing immune systems, and they weren't living too long. But the worst part was that they let these animals suffer. There's a wildlife law in India which prohibits the killing of animals. So basically, they had to just wait for these lions to die a slow, painful death on their own. It's a very tragic case of breeding gone wrong.
Number 10, the chimpanzee human, also referred to as humanzees, which is fun to say. Look, here are the facts, people. We were very close to chimpanzees, DNA-wise. Around 98% of our DNA is shared with these hairy fellows. Back in the 1920s, we got closer than ever. A humanzee was not just a fantasy. Soviet biologist Ilya Ivanov inseminated female chimps with human DNA, but it didn't work. Or did it? Things got questionable when a chimp named Oliver hit the scene in the 70s. Yeah, he was walking like a human, which we've never really seen before. He was referred to as the missing link because of his appearance and the way you would act. He was previously a performance animal. He was a show chimp, so not a hybrid, but many viewed these experiments as immoral back in the day. Which is, yeah, I agree. Also, I remember seeing chimps in family movies, I'm pretty sure. Remember those movies growing up where chimpanzees were like snowboarding or playing hockey? Most Extreme Primate, that was it. That's where we're at, chimpanzees doing barrel rolls and hockey stops. My friends, we're already there. I think we're already at the Planet of the Apes terrifying point. We're screwed if one of these experiments works, that's all I'm saying. Number 9, human cow eggs. Okay, we had a few giggles talking about chimps. Time to get into the real scary science. Back in 2008, hybrid research was being done. Human-animal hybrid research, obviously. The whole idea was to find a cure for Parkinson's disease. I like these projects because we're moving forward, at least. We're not just doing it because we're like, let's see if we can bring dinosaurs back. We're trying to find a solution. Otherwise, we don't need to be poking around cows. Nobody needs 3 bowls of cereal before gym class, okay? There's other ways to wake up in the morning. Let's just leave cows alone for like a bit, maybe? Scientists used the nucleus of a cow egg. They took it out and replaced that nucleus with the human and skin cells. And then in a little time, the egg can develop and turn into a blastocyst, aka a cloned embryo. And there we have stem cells for said science. Again, this is a lovely step, but how far do we go here with DNA mixing? How much DNA are we gonna mix before we're like, stop? Things could go south. For example, just like the number 8, Kunga. Perhaps the earliest example of human-animal hybrid testing. Scientists recently learned about this donkey hybrid that roamed ancient Mesopotamia. This was a time even before horses arrived, so they had to do something. Large Kungas would pull wagons, and smaller ones would help pulling plows and smaller loads. These little guys were the talk of the town. Imagine a hybrid animal before horses. No wonder they were a status symbol back then. 4,000 years ago, they were given as gifts for weddings. Nice, yummy. Oh, I wonder what this one is. It's definitely a Kunga. It's gotta be a Kunga. After so long, scientists are finally able to figure out what exactly a Kunga was a hybrid of. It was a female donkey and a male Syrian wild ass. Yeah, it's crazy what you can still learn from ancient animal bones from thousands of years ago. Science is incredible. It's more amazing how involved this hybrid was in Mesopotamian culture. Do we bring back the Kunga? I don't know. Kinda seems like we could use them. Number 7, woolly mammoth. It was announced less than a year ago that a team of scientists and entrepreneurs over at a new biosciences and genetics company called Colossal, they got the funding finally for quite this project. They're planning to bring the woolly mammoth back to life. Yep. Instead of just paying off student loans, they're like, how about we bring a mammoth back? Let's just see if we can do that. That'll solve some problems. The last mammoth alive was around 7,500 years ago. But what if we had these hairy Goliaths back again today? The Siberian tundra thousands of years ago was once full of these guys, but climate change began to slow them down. Also, humans needing food definitely didn't help. These guys provided warmth and, well, obviously look at them. Lots of food, so they died off quite quick. Genetics company Colossal raised over $15 million to try and bring this thing back to life. And they're on the way, they're doing it right now. That's happening as we speak. A mammoth is being born. They're using the CRISPR gene editing tool, which is a fun tool, I guess. Elephants are still kicking around and their genomes, combined with the preserved mammoth DNA, is the magic trick. So if you see mammoths trending on Twitter in 4 to 6 years, well, you know why. There's not another Ice Age movie. It's definitely just a real mammoth. Number 6, Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex also went extinct a long time ago. This was much sooner though than mammoths. This was around 2000. The last one was a female named Celia, and a falling tree sadly ended her life. Of all the ways to go, really? Come on, man, that's sad. It was a subspecies of the Spanish ibex. They were native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France. Back in the medieval ages, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level because of, knights and swords and bows equals lunch, right? So the numbers dipped, more than fair, there's armies to feed. But in 2009, science was ready for the Pyrenean ibex to return. It was successfully cloned and brought back from extinction for 7 whole minutes. Yeah, 7 minutes in heaven, or 7 minutes out of heaven, rather. DNA from the last living lady was implanted in the womb of a domestic goat. Yeah, a little goat hybrid. Lung complications are why the clone sadly didn't last, but we had a hybrid medieval animal for 7 minutes. We're getting close. Number 5, the super cow. Moo, but with a lot of O's. Introducing the super cow. Okay, start your day off with some super milk, and then have a super stomach ache. Your super pants. My God, I can't do milk anymore. Only in Belgium. Back in the 1800s, scientists and farmers brought together native cattle and short horn cattle to make this hybrid animal. After that, they would literally just pick the biggest cows of the bunch and then have them breed together, and then so on and so forth. These cows are officially called Belgian Blues, but I will continue to call them super cows. Thank you very much, because that sounds amazing. I can't even look at them. God, they're disturbing. They look like bodybuilders. Just, it makes no sense. What? Where does that come from? Let's move on. Number 4, Tasmanian tiger. Once native to Australia, the Tasmanian tiger, also known as the thylacine, was a massive carnivorous marsupial that went extinct around the 1930s, also quite recently. Major factors here are, as you guessed what I said earlier, climate change, hunting, and its genetic diversity wasn't all too great. All those combined, it's just no chance. It's sad on one hand because these beautiful creatures disappeared so recently, but it's also recent enough that we have a shot at bringing them back to life. Hey, what's up? Hey, you've been asleep. Hi. Hybrid science. There we go. Let's get mixing. Yeah, imagine looking outside and seeing this thing on your front yard. Are we ready for this? I think we're ready. Let's jazz up some trails by introducing these guys. Specimens of the Tasmanian tiger still remain preserved in jars. No idea who has them or why, but we'll move on from that. Thank God for those jars. So we have Tasmanian tiger genes present, so scientists can now insert them into a mouse fetus. They just combine fetus of a mouse and DNA. I do this a lot. This is how I'm gonna explain this to my kids and be like, hey, this is how the human life cycle works. You just do this with your hands a lot, and then you're alive. They're still lacking the full DNA to successfully recreate it, but they're close. A recent $5 million donation to the University of Melbourne earlier this year allowed for researchers to create a research lab. So, yep, they're actually getting very close. They're like making the lab to make this thing. I'm like, ooh, they're gonna do it. Number 3, the great razor auk. Yes, once thriving in colonies off North Atlantic coasts, the great auk would grow up to 30 inches long and its wings would only be used to swim. They were cute, but quite defenseless, these little guys. Around the 1500s, European fishermen discovered this perfect area for hunting and or eating, and it just happened to be where most of these great auks were hanging out. So they disappeared fast. By 1950, the last 2 known specimens were hunted by a single fisherman on Eldey Island, just off the coast of Iceland. And that was it. They were gone. Until now. Nice. Scientists plan on using genetic information extracted from their fossils, or preserved organs. Remember those guys in jars and the organs that I talked about? Yep. Classic organs in jars. Always coming in handy. They plan on editing their DNA into the closest living species, which is now the razor-billed auk. So now we get a nice fun hybrid again. The organization Revive and Restore is behind the wheel on this one, so keep it up. keep bringing things back from extinction. Just not humans. I don't want zombies, please. Number 2, lions. Back in the 80s in the Chatbir Zoo in India, they started an experimental program where they would breed together domestic lions and African lions in the hopes that they would just be introduced to the wild and help with the dwindling population of wild lions in India. On paper, that's a great idea. That's a step forward. We love those. But the zoo found 2 African lions that were being used in a circus and was like, you know what? We're gonna save you guys. Get out of the circus. Then they brought them in to breed with their 2 Asiatic lions. So, I mean, from circus to science, it's like, you're still sorry. When the cubs were born, it was clear this was already a mistake from the get-go. The cubs already had severely weak back legs. They were having trouble walking as they got older. Their immune system started to fail. And by 2000, they had bred more than 70 of these hybrid lions. So they finally decided to stop the program, and all the males were given vasectomies in order to stop any further reproduction. There are luckily laws that prohibited them from killing these animals, so at this point we're just waiting for them to die naturally, which sucks, but it's definitely better. And finally, number 1, the dodo bird. Dodo birds were once big and beautiful. These flightless ground nesting birds once filled the islands of Mauritius located in the Indian Ocean. They were awesome. We've seen them in Ice Age. They're all funny and big and furry. They had massive talons. They were gray and blue. They were gorgeous, and best part of all, they didn't have any natural predator until, us. Until we came around. Around 1507, the island was discovered by Portuguese sailors, and well, the rest is history or lunch. They were the easiest bird to hunt, hence the phrase dead as a dodo. They weren't just loved by sailors either. They were not 100% to blame here. Monkeys, rats, pigs, any animal basically that made its way to the island easily had their eggs for lunch, so it didn't take long for the dodo bird population to be completely wiped out. The last dodo was hunted in 1681, but could it be? Could we bring back said dodo birds? Scientists found an extremely well-preserved dodo skeleton back in 2007, so we may have a chance at picking some DNA apart there and bringing them back to life via hybrid science. A research facility near Melbourne, Australia is currently trying to use pigeon genes to bring the bird back. I mean, I'm all for the idea of bringing an animal back to life. Scientifically, that's definitely a feat in itself, but how long before these things are on hot ones, like dodo chicken wings? Now that I've said it, you kind of want one, right? Now you feel bad. There we go. Hit that thumbs up so we don't feel guilty in the future.
Starting off this countdown, we have the human-monkey hybrid. Guys, I wish this was fake, but it's not. So scientists are currently trying to make human-monkey hybrids. They have high hopes that these experiments will succeed because monkeys and humans are similar genetically. Spanish biologist Juan Carlos Belmonte is working with monkey researchers in China to perform these experiments. So basically, they are mixing human cells into monkey embryos. Their objective is to grow a monkey whose organs are completely made out of human cells. They then would use these animals and their organs for people that need the organs. Of course, this is controversial in a number of ways, as you can imagine.
In our number 9 spot today, we have bees. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. A lot of us know bees is pretty harmless and kind of cute little pollinators, unless of course you're allergic or terrified, but truthfully, bees normally do a lot more good than harm. That was of course until an experiment in the 70s went awry and caused a new crossbred bee. This experiment was to take a regular honeybee and breed it with a bee that was found in Africa that produces a lot more honey, and of course the goal was to produce a manageable bee that would also be able to provide more honey than a regular honeybee would. Well, the bees that came out were a lot less manageable and they didn't even make more honey. After this experiment ended, however, the bees got out into the environment and the 80s saw the beginning of the trouble. These bees are not only aggressive towards other kinds of bees, which creates a huge problem, but they're also very aggressive towards humans. And when these bees sting, their stinger stays with them so they can sting multiple times. Victims of these swarms receive 10 times as many stings as regular swarms. They react to disturbances 10 times faster, and they will also chase the disturbance a quarter of a mile. These bees have actually caused at least 1,000 deaths, so it's safe to say that this is one experiment gone horribly wrong.
Moving on, at number 8, we have the pig-human hybrid. Again, you heard me correctly. Scientists at the Salk Institute for Biological Sciences in California have created a human-pig hybrid. So in 2017, an embryo was placed in an adult pig for 4 weeks. Then it was taken out and analyzed, and the embryo survived and contained some human cells. So their hope is to grow human organs inside of pigs instead of waiting for a donor, similar to the tests that are being done on the monkeys, as I previously mentioned. no animals are safe at this point.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the wolfen. I wish I never had to say the word wolfen, but unfortunately they do exist. These guys are created when a female common bottlenose dolphin is bred with a male false killer whale. They're extremely rare and have been found in the wild, but unfortunately most of the ones that have existed were bred in captivity. The first recorded wolfen was born at the Tokyo SeaWorld in 1981, and he very sadly died just 200 days later. Probably a prime example of why they really maybe shouldn't even exist in the first place. The first that was born in the United States that actually miraculously survived was at a sea life park in Hawaii in May of 1985. She ended up having 3 babies. The first passed away after a few days, the second passed away at the age of 9, but thankfully the third one is still living. In March of last year, both her and her daughter are still alive, but they still remain in captivity.
Coming in at number 6, we have Ilya Ivanich Ivanov. What a name. But this is the name of the dude that originally tried to create a human-chimp hybrid. Ilya was a Russian biologist who did a number of disturbing experiments in the 1920s. He started with crossbreeding animals. So he managed to produce a zebra-donkey hybrid, a Z-donk, and a bison-cow cross, which is a Zubron, and also crossed rats, mice, guinea pigs, and rabbits together with each other. But he decided to take it further with the human and monkey crossing. In fact, he successfully managed to inseminate 3 female chimpanzees with human sperm. His experiments were so famous that 5 women actually offered to carry half-ape babies inside of them in the name of science, which thankfully didn't go through. Or if it did, he did it in private with no one else knowing.
In our number 5 spot today, we have farm cattle. In the 1990s, farmers in India were told that if they crossbred their cattle, they'd be able to breed cattle that could produce more milk, which would of course mean more money for them and their families. This should be amazing and great, right? Well, considering why we're all here today, I think we all know the answer to that question. Different breeds of bulls were brought in and farmers were expecting great things, but they ended up being stuck with cattle that did produce more milk, but also needed way more higher quality food, or else they'd stop producing more milk, and they were less resistant to the local diseases, so they required more veterinary visits. So it's this kind of situation like, yes, they are producing more milk, which will get us some more money, but they also cost us more, and truthfully, most of the times the increased milk production did not outweigh the growing costs.
In our 4th spot, we have Hiromitsu Nakuchi. Hiromitsu is a stem cell biologist from Tokyo. Just recently, his experiments have been approved by the government. And let me tell you what he's planning on doing. Basically, he hopes to grow human cells in mice and rats, and then transplant those embryos into surrogate animals. So again, another experiment having to do with growing human cells in animals. So his experiment started by injecting some cells into rat and mice embryos. But those rodents have been genetically manipulated so they can't make a pancreas for themselves. But his hope is that the rodents' bodies will use the human cells to then make a pancreas for themselves. Here's the thing. While conducting the experiments, if they find that the rats are starting to develop a human-type brain, then they have to stop the experiments on them. It's part of the agreement that he has with the government. They don't want a humanized animal coming into existence.
In our number 3 spot today, we have the beefalo. Okay, so beefalo sounds kind of cute and silly, and it also looks pretty normal, so what could be wrong with this one? Well, let's start at the beginning. So, a guy named Charles Buffalo Jones started breeding them in 1906 because the bison population in Arizona at the time was so exceptionally low. So, bison were bred with domestic cattle in order to produce a hardy commercial animal. He ended up just giving up on this and released the animals, who were then managed by the state, and the numbers remained relatively low because of the limited hunting licenses. Well, when the beefalo found their way into a national park where hunting is banned and there aren't any natural predators, the population began to grow by 50% a year. That's wild! So none of this is necessarily bad, but it's the animal's environmental impact that is really the trouble. First off, they're very thirsty animals and can consume 10 gallons each per trip to a watering hole. So they can obviously clear up a water source pretty quickly. Not to mention the fact that they do their business in the water and how their heavy weight compacts the soil. Basically, they have thrown the ecosystem off balance and have pushed out other animals, and the insects and plant life around have also been affected.
In our 2nd spot, we have the breeding gone wrong. If you're a dog lover like Olivia and I, then this story is going to make you upset. In 2010, a woman named Julie Leroy was working as an animal control officer when an owner of a pit bull puppy said she didn't want to keep her. When Julie saw the dog, she was in complete disbelief. life. The dog had a squished body, huge jaw, a bad underbite, and was oddly shaped. That's because the dog suffered from short spine syndrome. That's because they got the dog from a backyard breeder who was carelessly breeding a bunch of his dogs together. Thankfully, Julie took the dog in and gave her a loving home. But it's sad to see dogs born like this just from reckless people who only have money on their mind.
In our number 1 spot today, we have lions. In the 1980s, the Chatbir Zoo in India started an experimental program where they would breed together a domestic lion, which is a bit smaller and has a less shaggy mane, with an African lion in the hopes that they could be introduced to the wild and help with the dwindling population of wild lions in India. The zoo found 2 African lions that were being used in a circus and brought them in to breed with their 2 Asiatic lions. When the cubs were born, it was clear that this was already a mistake, as the cubs had severely weak back legs. They were having extreme trouble walking, and as they got older, their immune systems started to fail. By 2000, when they had already bred more than 70 of these hybrid lions, they finally decided to stop the program, and all of the males were given vasectomies in order to stop any reproduction. There are laws that prohibit them from killing animals, so they were simply just waiting for them to die naturally. When there's a dwindling population of lions, it's insane to me that they wasted 20 years trying to do this when they could have just simply bred the lions that they had.
Starting off this countdown, we have the rat pigs. The Salk Institute for Biological Studies in the US has been known to run a number of crossbreeding experiments. One was performed on rats and pigs. The team of scientists decided to take stem cells from rats and inject them into pig blastocysts. However, this failed, and I mean, I'm not surprised. Rats and pigs have different gestation times, and genetically they are very different. But imagine a pig that looked like a rat. Okay, that is terrifying. In our 9th spot, we have the human Z attempts. In 1967, scientists in China were working on creating a human-chimp mix. Sadly, not much information about these experiments have been disclosed to the public. But rumor has it that the experiments didn't really work. They wanted to basically create a chimp that could talk fluently in whatever language it was taught. Then in 1981, they tried this experiment again. They impregnated a female chimpanzee with human sperm. Turns out, the chimp did manage to get pregnant by it, but sadly passed away 3 months later due to complications. Coming in at number 8, we have the rat mouse. Scientists at the Salk Institute have found a way to grow the pancreatic tissue of a mouse inside of a rat. The mouse pancreas was able to grow inside of rats successfully. So they grew these new pancreases from mouse stem cells that were then placed in the bodies of the rats. And then when the pancreases were complete, they transplanted them back into the mice. Now the biggest thing about this experiment is that this technique could reverse diabetes in the mice. So they hope that one day they can grow organs inside the bodies of different animals, and then you transplant those organs into humans to cure diabetes. Of course, there's still so much work to be done on this. The last thing they want is to grow a human organ inside of an animal and then have the recipient's body reject it. In our 7th spot, we have the killer bees. Did you know that killer bees were accidentally created by scientists? If they're out here creating bees that threaten the ecosystem, then who's to say they won't create animals that do the same? Basically, this all started in the 1950s. A biologist was commissioned by the Brazilian government to create a species of bees that would increase honey production. But along the way, things went wrong. The biologist himself didn't have much experience with animal breeding. In the end, bees from southern Africa and local Brazilian honeybees mated, and it produced these angry killer bees. And then of course, thousands of these bees just accidentally escaped. Now they get their name because when pissed off, they have been known to chase people down for more than a quarter mile. And on top of that, their stings are very painful. These bees are also aggressive towards other bees as well. So it puts them at risk, and now we're kinda just stuck with them. In our 6th spot today, we have the human mouse. In the late 90s, 3 doctors started doing experiments to try and create human body parts in a lab. One of these experiments involved growing a human ear on the back of a mouse. So they did this by creating an ear-shaped scaffolding and putting cells of cartilage from a cow on it. They then put the mouse under anesthetic and placed this ear under its skin. Crazily enough, the mouse's body fed the cow cartilage cells. The scaffolding dissolved and the mouse grew this artificial shape of a human ear. But it was only the outside of an ear. Okay, it didn't work, there was no eardrum. Now you might be wondering why they did this. Well, their hope is that this will help plastic surgeons when reconstructing human ears for their patients. So they would create this ear on the mouse and then graft it onto the person. So you'd have an ear that is part mouse, part cow. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the goat with human milk. I swear I didn't make this up, it's real and I'm a little disturbed. But basically, scientists have figured a way for goats to produce human breast milk. They did this by transferring human breast milk enzymes and proteins into goat embryos. In the end, they found that the milk the goats were producing wasn't 100% human, but it contained 60% of the lysosome and lactoferrin found in human milk. Now, why do they want goats producing human breast milk? Well, it could feed and save babies in need. Plus, it would have a longer shelf life. Would you try this milk? Let me know in the comments below. I've heard breast milk is pretty sweet, but I don't think I want to try it. Coming in at number 4, we have the Belgian Super Cow. Now you guys know how much I love cows. And if you didn't know, then hi, my name is Lindsay and I love cows. But this thing is terrifying. It's monstrous, okay? It's super ripped and it's just massive. The Belgian super cows were created back in the 1800s when Belgian scientists and farmers mixed native cattle with shorthorn cattle. Then over the time they would select the biggest and strongest offsprings of each variety and then breed them together. So on and so on, bam! You got a super cow, which is definitely the biggest and strongest, and I understand why they call it the super cow. Like, just look at this beast, okay? It could crush anyone. In our 3rd spot, we have the Enviro Pig. So pig waste is actually pretty toxic. I mean, if you've seen the Simpsons movie, then you'd know all about it. I mean, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but still. Anyways, pig's waste contains really high levels of phosphorus. This phosphorus ends up in lakes and rivers and oceans and can cause a boom of algae. So scientists were trying to come up with a way for pigs to have less toxic waste, hence the creation of the Enviro Pig. Enviro pigs are pigs with up to 65% less phosphorus in their excrements. This pig was first created in 1999 at the University of Guelph's Farm in Canada. This pig had its phytase gene attached to a piece of mouse DNA. Now it's really complicated to explain, but here's an explanation, and I quote, "The genetically altered pig was created using genetic material from a mouse and an E. coli bacterium to reduce phosphorus in the pig's feces. In the end, it made the pig excrete fewer pollutants." Moving on to number 2, we have the pig with human blood. Now you're probably noticing a trend by now. Pigs and mice are the scientists' test subjects of choice. Researchers at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota have managed to create pigs made out of human blood. So the pigs have human blood pumping through their veins. Not only that, but some of the cells in the blood merge together to create pig-human cell hybrids. Now, the reason behind this all is to allow scientists to study how viral infections can transfer from animals to humans. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Oliver the chimp. In the 1970s, there was a performing chimpanzee that received a lot of attention. His name was Oliver. Now, Oliver was really different from other chimps for a number of reasons. The main being that Oliver might have been a successful mix between a human and a chimp. Yeah, you heard me. A lot of doctors and scientists are convinced that Oliver was a humanzee. It's believed that they inseminated a female chimp with male sperm, and Oliver was the offspring. Now let's take a look at the facts. Oliver didn't look like other chimps. In fact, he had a more human-like appearance. He had a flatter face than other chimpanzees, and he walked on 2 feet instead of all 4s. He also preferred human females over female chimpanzees, and he understood humans very well. So could it be that Oliver was actually half human, half chimp?
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Dolly the sheep. We had to start this list off with Dolly today because she really set the stage for everything on this list to come. You may have heard of Dolly the sheep before, and that is because she made history in 1996 when she was born. This is because she was the very first mammal to be cloned from an adult somatic cell. The process of cloning to create her involved nuclear transfer from a cell taken from the mammary gland. Basically, they transferred the nucleus from the adult cell into an unfertilized premature egg that had its nucleus removed, and boom, cloned sheep. This was huge for the scientific community because of the fact that it not only showed that cloning can be successful in mammals, but also because it showed that a cloned organism can be produced from a mature cell from a specific body part. While Dolly made history, she also sadly only lived a relatively short life. She ended up being euthanized just before her 7th birthday because of the fact that she had a progressive lung disease as well as arthritis, both of which are said not to be linked to her cloning origins. I guess it's kind of cool that Dolly existed, and the fact that we have these scientific abilities is amazing, but there's also something pretty ominous about it. I just hope we use these powers to do things like bringing back extinct animals, maybe, rather than some weird, mad scientist type of stuff. In our number 9 spot today, we have Samrupa. After the birth of Dolly the sheep, scientists everywhere began trying their hand at cloning, and that is when Samrupa was born. Back in 2009, Samrupa was born in India and was a Murrah buffalo, which is known as being the best known milking buffalo, since these animals can be capable of producing 35 kilograms of milk a day. The birth of Samrupa marked a breakthrough in the country because it put India on the map as one of the few countries at the time who had the capabilities to clone, and this was all done using a new at the time landmark technique which was called hand-guided cloning. The scientists who helped to create Samrupa worked on the calf for 4 years, so it's clear that they were all very excited about its birth. Unfortunately, however, shortly after Samrupa's birth, things went seriously wrong. Just 5 days after birth, Samrupa unfortunately succumbed to a lung infection and passed away. While the scientists weren't able to save the animal, it is very clear that its birth and short life helped scientists in remarkable ways that went on to inform them in future experiments and projects. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex is an animal that went extinct around 2000. In a horrible turn of events, the last one was a female named Celia, and she was killed in an awful falling tree incident. A subspecies of the Spanish ibex, the Pyrenean ibex were native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France. Back in the medieval ages, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level. This is due to 2 things: being hunted as well as the spread of human disease. Flash forward to 2003, however, and scientists tried to bring them back to life. This is the first extinct creatures that scientists ever tried to clone. That is absolutely crazy. For 7 minutes. DNA from Celia, the last living individual of the species, was taken and implanted into the womb of a domestic goat. From here, the clone was in fact born, but due to lung complications was unable to survive for longer than 7 minutes. It was a short life, but a monumental one that definitely broke new ground in the scientific world. In our number 7 spot today, we have Garima 1. Garima is similar to Samrupa that we already talked about, and in fact she was born in the same place, the National Dairy Research Institute, just shortly after Samrupa, and luckily her birth did end up being more successful considering she made it past the first year of life. She was actually cloned on June 6th, 2009, and things seemed to be going quite well until around June and July of 2011. Garima was created through the same hand-guided cloning technique as Samrupa, so it's clear that the technique was evolving and getting better, but things still unfortunately went awry. When things took a turn for the worst, doctors struggled to figure out exactly what was the problem, but eventually it was revealed that her problem was with her heart. Researchers revealed that her heart was abnormally overweight and much larger in size than other buffaloes her same age, and this likely led to the complications she faced that sadly culminated in her passing in August of 2011. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Argali. In the earlier days of cloning experiments, scientists attempted to clone an Argali, which is also known as a type of mountain sheep. These sheep are known to roam the highlands of western East Asia, the Himalayas, Tibet, and the Altai Mountains. The reason they wanted to clone these sheep is because they are important to the ecosystems they live in, and unfortunately they are a threatened species. Now, I know there's controversy over the cloning of threatened or extinct species, but personal opinions aside, they were making this attempt to see if this could be a viable way to potentially save a species. Unfortunately, however, these attempts would prove to be futile. Using the same techniques used in the instance of Dolly the sheep, the somatic cell nuclear transfer, while they believed it would be promising, all attempts to clone the mammal failed to produce any viable results, and thus modern science wasn't able to assist in the continuation of this species. But in good news, while the species is still threatened, it is still around and not quite endangered, although its life is mainly threatened due to trophy hunters and ranchers. In our number 5 spot today, we have the gar. A gar is a species of wild cattle that is native to South Asia and Southeast Asia, and unfortunately they are listed as a vulnerable species on the IUCN IUCN Red List, and they have been since 1986. This is exactly why, in 2001, scientists decided it was time to try and clone one. With a population that has declined over 70% in the last 3 generations, they seemed like a perfect candidate to become the first ever endangered species to be cloned. In 2001, at the Trans-Ova-Genetics Center in Sioux Center, Iowa, they were able to birth a clone gar. They obviously used gar DNA, but used a domestic cow as a surrogate mother to carry the clone. This of course was a huge breakthrough, but unfortunately the life of the gar was cut short as the calf passed away within 48 hours of its birth. Although this is obviously terrible, I guess the upside is that it is believed that the calf passed due to dysentery, which is not thought to have been related to the cloning process, which does mean that although the outcome wasn't as predicted or hoped, the cloning could still be considered a success. In our number 4 spot today we have Injaz. With a name that means achievement, she clearly was exactly that, because Injaz was the first camel clone ever produced. She was born back in 2009 at the Camel Reproduction Center in Dubai, and she certainly was a proud accomplishment for all of those who worked to create and raise her. In fact, the cloning of Injaz was such a success that she lived for over a decade. Her birth prompted the center to continue cloning camels, which they did about 20 to 25 times a year in the time after Injaz was born. She broke ground once again when she proved that cloned camels could in fact conceive and give birth naturally, and she did so a few times, but in the end it would be this that led to her demise. On her 4th calf, as she carried it, it grew to be too big for her to carry, which unfortunately led to dystocia late in her pregnancy. Scientists did their best to save her, but unfortunately they lost both of them. Everyone who worked to care for Injaz was rightfully extremely upset at her passing, but they clearly used her and her success as a starting point for what was to come. Now the center is turning out dozens of cloned camels every year, some going for $55,000. Not sure how I feel about that, but you know, whatever. In our number 3 spot today we have the Bantang. Back in 2003, scientists at the Advanced Cell Technology of Worcester, Massachusetts were ecstatic when they successfully birthed a clone Bantang, which is an endangered species of cattle. To do this, they actually took frozen tissues from a male of the species that passed away many years earlier in 1980. They used these skin cells and inserted the nuclei into cow eggs, and a cow was used as a surrogate mother. They attempted this with 16 pregnancies, 2 of which came to term. With the success of one clone did come the birth of another identical twin who was born to a different cow mother, but despite being carried to term and birth, this clone was not as expected. It was twice the normal birth weight, which quickly proved to be a very negative sign. As for the clone who was considered a success, it was hand-raised at the San Diego Wild Animal Park's Infant Isolation Unit. Unfortunately, however, due to an injury that the animal got when it was less than 7 years old, it did end up passing away, which meant that sadly the clone only lasted for about half the expected lifespan for this species of animal. In our number 2 spot today we have the woolly mammoth. We would certainly be missing a very important animal on this list if we didn't include the woolly mammoth. These guys were of course a species of mammoth, and in fact they were one of the last in line of the mammoth species. Because of the fact that in both Alaska and Siberia there were frozen carcasses discovered, they're actually one of the most well-studied extinct creatures. Exactly why or how they were driven to extinction is widely debated, and another thing people like to debate is whether or not we should try and bring them back. There was a genome project completed in 2015, and since then it has been proposed the species could be revived through a few different means, but no one has yet taken the leap. Here's the thing though, there's a new company that is pretty set on de-extincting woolly mammoth, and they have a new investor. This investor is called In-Q-Tel, and they are registered as a non-profit venture capital firm that is funded by the CIA. They claim that the interest in this company is less about mammoths and more about the capability to do such crazy projects. I know this is more like a future project that might happen, but when we're talking about a huge animal like the woolly mammoth, we have to bring it up. Okay, I live in Canada. That's where the woolly mammoth would also live, I feel like. I don't know, I feel like it just has consequences for me, so I'm concerned. In our number 1 spot today we have the Morian viviparous tree snail. This was a species of air-breathing tropical land snails that were endemic endemic to French Polynesia, and their near extinction was caused by a chain of events that happened after something humans did. The African land snail was introduced into Tahiti in 1967 as a food source, but it quickly escaped and began to destroy crops. Biologists wanted to attempt to control the African land snail, so they decided to introduce the rosy wolf snail to the area in 1977. This went absolutely haywire, as the rosy wolf snail didn't just control the population of African land snails, but rather started to eradicate all of the snails that were native to the area, which of course includes our little friend. So this one little introduction led to them being totally extinct in the wild. These snails still exist in captivity, and there have been attempts to re-release them into the wild, maybe clone them to boost their population numbers, but unfortunately the rosy wolf snail continues to prey upon them, so at this point researchers are unsure if it will ever be possible for them to live in the wild again.
Starting with number 10 now, we have David Reimer. When this Canadian man was born in 1965, he was sent to be circumcised, but the doctors experimented with an unconventional technique and ended up removing David's entire penis. Now, doctors told his parents the best solution would be to give him a sex change operation right there and then, raise him as a girl, and never let him know the truth. This ended up tearing his parents apart, and his dad told David the truth when he was 14. David then chose to get a reverse sex operation. It was a success. However, David struggled a lot with the events of his past and ended up committing suicide at just 38 years old. At number 9 now, we have the chimp baby. In the 1930s, a scientist called Winthrop Kellogg thought a chimp could grow up to be like a human if it lived alongside a human baby, his own son. For 9 months, he conducted experiments, and his son Donald was inseparable from the chimp called Gua. They ate together and they played together. They noticed that Gua was picking up more and more human tendencies from Donald than ever before, but the experiment came to an abrupt halt when Donald, the human baby, began to regress and become more like a chimp. Apparently, he would just sit there howling and wailing and would struggle to pick up even basic language like a normal human baby. The experiment was stopped immediately. Alright, at number 8 now, we have the monster study. This 1939 experiment was conducted on 22 orphans to see how children responded to positivity and negativity when it comes to speech therapy. Half the children were praised for their efforts, while the other half were teased and belittled for their speech imperfections. Many of the children who received this negative feedback went on to suffer serious psychological damage for the rest of their lives. It was so bad that some of them could barely even speak again. The monster study got its name from its shocking experimentation on orphan children just to prove a hypothesis. Alright guys, coming in at number 7 now, we have Tusco. This one was just messed up, if I'm honest. In 1962, when the CIA was absolutely obsessed with finding out the effects of LSD, they experimented on an elephant with the help of the University of Oklahoma. The elephant, called Tusco, weighed 3.5 tons and was given enough LSD to make 3,000 humans hallucinate. The CIA were trying to see if they could make the elephant enter must, which is a naturally occurring state where elephants become violent and uncontrollable. The experiment was a total disaster. Trusco almost immediately collapsed and had a seizure for almost 2 hours before finally dying. At number 6 now, we have the Stanford Prison Experiment. This psychology experiment conducted by Stanford University involved splitting 24 random students into 2 groups. One group were the prison guards and the others were their prisoners. This was set up for them to study how power and authority works within human groups, but it got really messed up. It was supposed to last 2 weeks, but had to be stopped after just 6 days because the guards began to abuse their power. They would emotionally and physically abuse the prisoners. After just the first day alone, the guards were already attacking them with fire extinguishers. Yeah. Some of them suffered serious mental and physical injuries for life. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the yellow fever experiment. Dr. Firth was a scientist who was trying to prove that yellow fever was not contagious and was actually due to the difference between summer and winter. Now, in an effort to prove this, he tried to infect himself with yellow fever by drinking the vomit of victims. He also injected it into his body and even poured it onto his eyes. Well, it turns out he was right about the whole seasonal thing, but for the wrong reason. It's mosquitoes that are the ones who spread yellow fever, and they hibernate in the winter. So all the vomit drinking and pouring in the eyes was for nothing. At the number 4 spot now, we have testicle radiation. In 1963, researchers offered prisoners in the Washington and Oregon area $25 to participate in reproductive radiation tests. Now, they were told they wanted to see how a normal dose of X-ray level radiation would affect a man's testicles. Instead, they hit them with about 6 times that amount of radiation. The prisoners, as you might expect, developed testicular cancer, they became sterile, and had many other health problems. The class action lawsuit only gave $2,000 to each of the victims. We're at the number 3 spot now, and we have TGN-1412. This was the name of an experimental drug used to treat leukemia. As with most drugs for humans, it was first tested on animals to see if it was non-fatal. It wasn't. In fact, everything was fine with the animals. They moved on to testing the drug on humans, and just to be safe, they gave them a dose 500 times lower than the level found safe in animals. 6 of the test subjects were hospitalized with massive organ failure. The trial was stopped, and researchers started to work on why this drug was fine in the animals but almost killed 6 humans that it was given to. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the Guatemala syphilis experiment. This experiment involved US-backed Guatemalan doctors infecting soldiers, prisoners, and prostitutes in Guatemala with syphilis in order to study it. They wanted to see what the effectiveness of penicillin was on syphilis, except they only used penicillin on about half of the 1,308 people involved in the study. At least 83 people died, and 63 years later, President Barack Obama apologized on behalf of the US to the Guatemalan president. And finally, at number 1 now, we have MK Ultra. This CIA experiment was conducted in the 50s and the 60s in an effort to see if LSD and other drugs could mind control people. They tested the drug on countless unwitting citizens. Some of them weren't even American. Many of them suffered life-altering mental conditions and became very unstable. Those that tried to speak out about what happened met mysterious deaths, such as suspicious suicides. Not surprisingly, most of the documents involved with these shocking experiments were later destroyed.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Rabbit Man. Yes, I'm talking about a human-animal hybrid between a human and a rabbit. So basically, the first successful experiment was done in 2003 in Shanghai. A team of scientists managed to fuse human cells with rabbit eggs. In the United States, scientists have been trying to do the same thing, but their attempts were always unsuccessful. But in Shanghai, they managed to pull it off. This experiment was done to see if rabbits could be used to grow cells or tissues for transplant patients. But in the end, they only allowed the human rabbit to develop for a couple of days before they had to destroy it and then harvest it for stem cells. Moving on at number 9, we have the goat-human milk mix. Let me just start by saying this experiment is quite interesting, to say the least. But basically, scientists have figured a way for goats to produce human breast milk. So basically, scientists transferred human genes for breast milk enzymes and proteins into goat embryos. In the end, they found that the milk the goats were producing was not 100% human, but it contained 60% of the lysosome and lactoferrin found in human milk. Maybe this weird goat human milk is gonna change the future. It could feed and save babies in need. It also means a longer shelf life for this milk. Would you guys ever try this milk? Let me know in the comments below. Moving on at number 8, we have the pigs with human blood. In my last video, I talked about how pigs were used to help create human organs. Well, that's not all. Researchers at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota have managed to create pigs with human blood. Yeah, they have human blood pumping through their veins. Not only that, but some of their cells in the blood merged to create pig-human cell hybrids. Kind of weird, not gonna lie. Hit that thumbs up button if you agree. But scientists are using this to study how viral infections can transfer from animals to humans. In our 7th spot, we have the glow-in-the-dark cats. Scientists have been conducting experiments on cats to study molecules that could stop HIV/AIDS. So the virus responsible for HIV in humans is similar to feline immunodeficiency virus, FIV, in cats. So what they did was insert a gene that produces a fluorescent protein called GFP. This is produced naturally in jellyfish, believe it or not. But it's what gives these kitties a green glow. Then they also inserted a gene that blocks the FIV virus into unfertilized eggs of the cat. When the cat gave birth to the kitties, if they glowed green, that meant they also have the anti-FIV gene. They hope that these experiments will one day lead to them finding a way to make humans resistant to HIV. In our sixth spot, we have the human sheep livers. In 2007, scientists at the University of Nevada, Reno claims they managed to grow human livers inside of sheep. So they did this by injecting human stem cells from bone marrow into growing sheep fetuses. Sheep is apparently good for this because their circulatory system is similar to ours. In the end, they said the livers will be made with 20% human cells. They are hopeful that one day this can be used to help grow human organs for those in need of transplant. We are now at our fifth and halfway mark with the mice with a human brain. In 2005, Irving Westman, a professor at Stanford University and co-founder of the company Stem Cells Inc., was given permission to create a mouse-human hybrid. So what they did was transplant human brain stem cells into the brains of mice. They did this in hopes to study neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. In the first round of tests, they found that the mouse brain consisted of less than 1% of human cells. But in 2010, they were much more successful. That's when they managed to, and I quote, use mouse stem cells to develop sensory hair cells, which could combat human hearing loss. They also managed to make the mice more human, in the sense that the mice with the human brain cells were more intelligent than other regular mice. Isn't that crazy? Like their brains were containing certain human cells. Science is crazy. Hit that thumbs up button if you agree. Coming in at number 4, we have Oliver the chimpanzee. Now this next story was quite controversial for a number of reasons. But basically, there was a chimpanzee named Oliver that wasn't like other chimps. No, he had a lot of human characteristics that made people think that he was indeed a human chimpanzee hybrid. For example, he had more human-like traits. He had a flatter face than other chimpanzees, and he walked on 2 feet instead of all 4s. He also preferred human females over female chimpanzees. In fact, a lot of doctors and scientists at the time were convinced he was a humanzee, a human and a chimpanzee. Furthermore, renowned Dr. Gordon Gallup from the University of New York said there was reason to suspect that Oliver was a human-chimpanzee hybrid. Now, they ended up finding out that his chromosomes matched that of a chimpanzee, not a human, but they never did a full DNA test. So many people think that Oliver was some messed up experiment. In our third spot, we have cow eggs with human cells. In 2008, British researchers were given the okay to conduct some human-animal experiments. So they decided to manipulate cow eggs. They took the nucleus of the cow egg, which is the source of the most DNA, and replaced it with the nucleus of a human cell. They then watched the egg develop and multiply. Scientists could then extract the stem cells from this and use it for disease treatments. These experiments were conducted with the hopes to one day find a cure for Parkinson's disease. Moving on to number 2, we have the human sheep. Okay, this one has to be the weirdest one on this list. I feel like I said that before already, but just wait and you be the judge. So in 2017, villagers in South Africa were horrified when a sheep gave birth to something that they thought was brought into this world by the devil. The sheep did not look like a sheep or lamb or whatever. Instead, it looked like a half-human with hooves. Many people in the village were convinced that bestiality and witchcraft were behind this creature, whereas others believed that it was sent by the devil. Apparently, it was just a stillborn lamb, but still, there's a lot of rumors of someone injecting the sheep with male sperm. And in our number 1 spot, we have the mouse with the human ear. In the late 90s, 3 doctors started doing experiments on creating human body parts in a lab. One of the things they managed to do was grow a human ear on the back of a mouse. So they did this by creating an ear-shaped scaffolding and putting cells of cartilage from a cow on it. They then put the mouse under anesthetic and placed this ear thing under the skin. Crazily enough, the mouse's body fed the cow cartilage cells. The scaffolding dissolved, and the mouse was growing this artificial shape of a human ear. But it was only the outside of an ear. There was no eardrum. But they did this in order to help plastic surgeons that have a hard time reconstructing human ears for their patients. So they would create this ear on the mouse and then graft it onto a person.
Experimenting in at number 10 with glowfish. These cool looking fish are a product of genetic engineering. Zebrafish were the first glowfish available to the public in pet stores, but now there's a huge variety of different type of glowfish on the market. They are available in many different fluorescent colors such as red, green, orange, blue, and purple. I love them. I've owned a lot of them, but I don't know if they're actually like the glowfish or just the neon fish. Originally, glowfish was created to detect pollution by turning into fluorescent colors, but that didn't work out according to plan. Alright, number 9, the transparent frog. This species of frogs was genetically engineered so that we no longer need to dissect frogs. You can clearly see all of its organs, blood vessels, and eggs, so science classes no longer need to kill frogs in order to dissect their bodies. Students can now observe their life cycles of the frog, such as ovulation and also metamorphosis. Now at number 8, we have a micro pigs. A company in China is using a gene editing techniques to create and sell micro pigs as pets. These tiny pigs weigh about 15 kilograms when they're fully grown, which is about the size of, a medium dog. Each micro pig will be sold for about $1,500, and customers in China will be able to pick the animal's color and coat pattern because the scientists can manipulate the genetic makeup of the pig. Lactose-free milk spills its way into number 7. Scientists have created a genetically modified cow whose whole milk doesn't have the substance that causes allergic reactions in people. I know for me, I'm allergic. This milk also contains more casein, which is actually a very nutritious protein that is found in regular milk, and it has a higher calcium level in it and could improve cheese yields. Getting tangled in at number 6 is the spider goats. Don't worry, these animals aren't goat-sized spiders because holy shit, how terrifying would that be? They are actually genetically modified sheep that produce a spider silk protein in their milk, so they're able to use this silk in a variety of ways. It is used for medicine and to create a strong fabric. Landmine detecting plants blows up in at number 5. These plants were genetically engineered to detect landmines in soil by changing color. These plants have the potential to prevent thousands of deaths and injuries by signaling where the deadly explosives are hidden. These plants are sensitive to nitrogen dioxide gas, which is released by underground landmines, and they will turn from green gas to bright red, so you can clearly see it. Next up at number 4, we have the Vacanti mouse. This was a laboratory mouse created by Charles Vacanti in 1995, and it had a human ear growing on its back. I mean, ew. The ear was actually constructed out of a cow cartilage cells that was placed into an ear-shaped mold and then implanted under the skin of the mouse. The cartilage grew by itself naturally, and it was created to see whether fabricated cartilage structures could be implanted into the human body. The EnviroPig comes in at number 3. They are genetically modified Yorkshire pigs that have the capability to digest plants more efficiently than other conventional pigs. The benefits of the EnviroPig are reduced feeding costs and reduced phosphorus pollution. The EnviroPig actually produces 65% less phosphorus in its feces. However, they lost their funding in 2012, so it's no longer being produced. Dropping in at number 2, we have the sudden death mosquito. A company in the UK has genetically engineered a breed of mosquitoes that is designed to kill other mosquitoes. This particular breed is released into the wild to mate with females in order to transfer a lethal gene which kills the young mosquitoes inside of her so she can no longer reproduce. Scientists believe by doing this, they can control the spread of the dengue fever, which is a devastating viral disease. Finally, number 1 is Dolly the sheep. She was the first mammal to be cloned from an adult cell. She was cloned in Scotland back in 1996, and she lived up until 2003, where she died of lung cancer. She had 3 mothers. One provided the egg, another provided the DNA, and the third one carried the clone embryo to term. I mean, is this real life right now? That is insane. You have 3 mothers? That is like a lot of birthday gifts and Christmases. So this lamb was fertile and had 6 lambs in total until she died.
In our number 10 spot, we have Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir is a scientist from the Soviet Union that tried to create a 2-headed dog. Not making this up. Not in the regular crossbreeding way that you may assume. He literally amputated the body of one of the dogs and attached it to the other. This honestly makes me sick to talk about. The dogs only lasted 4 days before passing away, and guess what? He did it again. He did it again. The next experiment ended up with 2 dogs living for about a month. But guess what? He literally had no purpose for these experiments. Just the ego satisfaction of being able to say that he did it. Well, thankfully he didn't, because he doesn't deserve any satisfaction or praise. Just gross. In our number 9 spot, we have Paracelsus. Paracelsus is known for being a Swiss physician, scientist, and alchemist in the 1500s during the Renaissance. He didn't necessarily experiment with crossbreeding humans with animals, but he did experiment with making humans tiny and ginormous. Also, he was seemingly evil/insane, so I just wanted to put him on this list. Paracelsus was convinced he could grow giants and tiny humans by growing them from a jar of Yep. Apparently he would keep the jar in a warm place and feed the creatures blood to make them grow. I can just see him sprinkling in some blood into that jar. Apparently he was quite successful and managed to grow tiny humans, but allegedly the small creatures turned on him and ran away. Naturally. They were said to be a foot high. In our number 8 spot, we have Irving Wiseman. Irving Wiseman was working at Stanford University as a researcher when he was given permission to inject a mouse with human brain cells. They just wanted to see what would happen. They were instructed to stop the experiment once the human-like behaviors got to a specific point, like improved memory or problem solving, because then they'll have a pinky in the brain sitch, and the concept of that only sounds good in the cartoon world. I'm not ready for a mouse world takeover anytime soon. In our number 7 spot, we have Gordon Gallup and his team of scientists. Okay, so not saying Gordon Gallup is the evil scientist, but more that all of the scientists that consented to do this in the first place may have been operating from an evil frequency. Or perhaps they were just doing what they were told because it's their job, because let's be real, the real powerful people that make the decisions are the ones funding such projects as these. But since I have no idea who funded this, as that would probably take too much digging that I don't have time for, and it will probably just lead us to the US government, we're going to just call this spot Gordon Gallup and his team of scientists. Gordon Gallup was once one of the leading experts in evolutionary psychology, and he worked with a team of scientists in the 1920s on interbreeding humans with chimpanzees. He leaked to the press that they were actually successful. The experiment was conducted at the Orange Park Laboratory in Florida. Everyone proceeds to Google the financial backers there. This is where a female chimpanzee was inseminated with human. The animal not only became pregnant, but then proceeded to give birth to a living being, a human Z. But get this, they did not allow the human Z to live. After all of that, it was euthanized. What the heck, man? Potentially harmed this animal by impregnating it only to kill its baby cub. My inner future mama bear is poking through, and I don't like this. In our number 6 spot, we have another group of scientists, the Belgian scientists. It really is so hard to name just one scientist responsible, because it really does take a village to raise a child, and in this case, to create a mutant cow. Yes, a team of Belgian scientists started back in the 1800s to breed native cattle with short-horn cattle, and over time they only selected the biggest and strongest, and eventually that led them to creating the Belgian super cow. A ginormous cow that literally looks like it's on steroids, and I'm kinda afraid of it. I'm very afraid of it. It is unclear why these experiments were being done. I can only assume for more meat. So I guess we can't call these scientists evil per se without a justified reason, but hopefully they have a good one, because otherwise, leave those cows alone. In our number 5 spot, we have Juan Carlos Belmonte. Juan is a biologist at the Salk Institute in California that has been working with other scientists and researchers in China on creating a human-animal chimera. Basically, a monkey embryo will be given human cells to create this. Now, before you get upset and say, "What 4. I think this may arguably be the best reason for doing this kind of experiment. The reason this is being done is to see if animals can possess organs such as livers and kidneys that are entirely human and can be used in the future as organs for transplants. As we do have a transplant shortage around the world, coming up with a solution to this is vital. Apparently, every 10 minutes a new person is added to the waiting list for an organ transplant. So at this point, it is unclear as to whether the experiment has been completely successful, but I'm sure we'll know in the upcoming years. In our number 4 spot, we have Dr. Karl Klauberg. This guy is truly very evil. He was a doctor that would work in the infamous monstrous camps that I cannot name due to YouTube violation reasons, so please catch my drift. The monstrous camps during World War II, specifically the Poland camp. Apparently, originally he was interested in sterilizing all of the women of the camp, and eventually his interests expanded. He was allowed to experiment on thousands, but only 700 survived. He also artificially inseminated prisoners through a variety of methods and tormented his victims by claiming to have injected animal sperm into their womb to create a monster. There are no reports that confirm this to be 100% true, as well as there are no reports of the after effects of this, so we have to conclude that this horrible, unconsented experiment was thankfully a failure. Just pure evil. In our number 3 spot, we have Hiromitsu Nagauchi. Hiromitsu is a scientist from Japan that is leading a team at the University of Tokyo. He and his team plans to grow human cells in mice and rat embryos and then transport them into surrogate animals, similar to work being done at Stanford University in the US. The goal is yet again to continue to see if animals can produce human organs that can later be transplants for humans. Up until recently, Japan was very strict as to how long the human cells in the embryos were allowed to be kept alive till, but recently the laws changed and they're allowed to be kept until the animal is brought to term. Whoa. This will help so much in terms of what they will be able to find through studying this process, but of course there are many ethical concerns around this experiment, such as once this new animal is brought to term, then won't it be a baby? Some claim that this is pure evil to then destroy this baby after, but gosh, I wonder if the decision maker of these experiments struggle with this, because I definitely would. In our number 2 spot, we have an unknown evil scientist that created the human sheep. In 2017, villagers of a small town in South Africa were frightened when a local sheep gave birth to a human sheep crossbreed. This is truly terrifying stuff that will haunt your dreams. Like, terrifying. It will definitely haunt mine. Imagine human sheep wandering the world. No thanks. Clearly this experiment was done by some evil scientist that decided, heck, I'm going to just let this happen and see how it unfolds. No one knows exactly how it was done, but most think the sheep was just artificially inseminated. The baby born was a stillborn, but if it had made it out alive, I bet you the world would have been on the hunt for the person responsible. In our number 1 spot, we have Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov. Known from his title, the Red Frankenstein, who was said to have been the creator of artificial insemination. His interest eventually turned into being interested in crossbreeding. In the 1920s, he traveled to Africa. After already successfully crossbreeding a zebra and a donkey, he now wanted to crossbreed a human and an ape. Apparently, after a while of living in Africa, he became desperate as his funds became increasingly low, that he then began to inseminate African women with chimpanzees without their knowledge. Holy, that's disgusting. Eventually, when people found out about what he was doing, he was shut down and his name was forever tarnished, and yeah, I'm glad, because that's horrible.
Coming in at number 10, we have a rat with an ear on its back. Right. Scientists in Japan grew a human ear on the back of a rat. The ear was made from human cartilage taken from a rib cage and grown with the purpose of being a replacement body part for people with deformities. Doctors in the UK have managed to grow a nose on a human arm, which is kind of cool, but an ear on a rat's back seems a little bit cruel. I'm assuming once that ear is ready, it's curtains for Mr. Rat. Coming in at number 9, we have glowfish. Imagine patenting a fish. Well, the term glowfish is patented and trademarked, and the product, if you will, is a fluorescent fish. Colours include electric green, sunburst orange, moonrise pink, starfire red, cosmic blue, and galactic purple. Seriously, who names these? Glowfish are owned by Yorktown Technologies, and they achieved their brightly coloured fish by inserting a gene. They are currently the only genetically modified animal to be sold in the USA. Coming in at number 8, we have sudden death mosquitoes. How fun do these sound? Yeah, not fun at all. I hate mosquitoes. Luckily, the sudden death part isn't actually aimed at us humans. Sudden death mosquitoes were developed to kill mosquitoes and not us. The insects were created to try and stem the spread of dengue fever. The World Health Organization said that as things were in 2012, half of the population of the planet was at risk of contracting dengue. So enter the sudden death mosquito, a breed of the insect that is either sterile or unable to produce healthy offspring. Therefore, this lowered the number of infectious mosquitoes out there. Coming in at number 7, we have super salmon. Super salmon! It sounds like a really weird superhero. Actually known as Aqua Advantage salmon, these are genetically modified huge salmon with an added growth hormone. The modified fish grows to full market size in half of the time it takes natural salmon. Concerns have been raised as to the ethics of this practice and also to the possibility that the fish would swim out to unobserved waters and compete with natural wild salmons. Coming in at number 6, we have micro pigs. In China, scientists genetically engineered teeny tiny pigs with the purpose of selling them as pets. They are also working on the ability to provide custom ordered pigs too, where customers can choose the colour coat of the pig and what patterns they have, which I think is actually just taking it a little bit too far. Coming in at number 5, we have this see-through frog. There are also some see-through fish out there which are pretty cool. This see-through frog was created in 2007 so that scientists could allow for research to take place without dissection. The Japanese scientists hope that the see-through skin will allow for observation of organs and blood vessels. Researchers sometimes inject the frog with fluorescent markers to observe what is happening in their bodies. For me, it's crazy that you can see an animal's heart pump through its skin. Coming into number 4, we have featherless chickens. This actually makes me feel really sad. Featherless chickens have only been developed for the sole purpose of poultry farming. Developed in 2002, the birds created at the Hebrew University in Israel were designed to save money for chicken farmers who would not need to pluck these birds. Critics of the creation say that this is unfair to chickens who will enjoy a lower quality of life. They'd be more prone to sunburn as well as more likely to suffer in cold climates. Basically, these sad bald chickens are just created to feed us, and that's it. Coming in at number 3, we have Dolly the clone sheep. Dolly was cloned from a cell and was planted into a surrogate ewe. Dolly was named as such because the cells used to clone her were taken from a sheep's mammary glands. The owner said that there are no more impressive mammaries out there than those owned by Dolly Parton. Thus Dolly was born. Really creepy. Dolly died shortly before turning 7, which is quite young for a sheep. Some scientists speculate that this is because the sheep that she was cloned from was 6 years old, meaning that she could have been born with adult cells. Coming into number 2, guys, brace yourself, we have glow-in-the-dark cats. Okay, so these glow-in-the-dark cats not only glow in the dark, but they also fight AIDS, which is a sentence I didn't think I was going to say today. In 2011, scientists genetically modified cats, inserting one gene into them that helps them resist feline AIDS. They also inserted a glow-in-the-dark protein called GFP because why not? The GFP protein is found in jellyfish, and scientists used it in cats to make it easy to spot the altered genes. Not only are these cats the literal cutest, they're also helping further research into stopping the spread of HIV. Coming into number 1, we have a human pig. Oh my goodness. In January 2017, scientists successfully injected a pig embryo with human cells. The reasoning behind this is because scientists are experimenting with ways to grow organs in order to meet demands for transplants. The team at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in San Diego have called the new species Chimera. This means it is an organism that contains cells from two different species. It's a hybrid. This is the first time a human chimera has been created. Previous versions include a rat and mouse hybrid.